My name is Plamen Mirazchyiski. I work at the IEA Data Processing and Research Center in Hamburg, Germany. Today I will talk on a slightly different topic, also as Sylvia said, compared to my colleagues. And also the data and all the discussion will be slightly different than the previous presentations. Previously you have all heard about Tim's pearls with main focus on the results, but also some on the methodology. My topic is on civic participation, something that is different, but let's not forget that the overall one of the goals of the education is not just to provide knowledge on core subjects, but also to shape citizens and to prepare them to participate in the society actively. So this paper is in collaboration with my colleague Andrés Sandoval Hernandez. You already know him from the previous workshops, and also Daniel Caro from Oxford University. So a bit of the broader context that is related with this study and that actually objectifies this study is, so I focus on civic participation, and I compare Eastern European countries and also the rest of Europe, which includes not only the West, so that's why the paper is named Differences Between the East and the Rest, because Europe is a quite diverse continent to be just split to East and West. So civic participation differed in former Eastern European, the former East Bloc, when it was encapsulated behind the Iron Curtain, and it was a choice that had been made. So this Cold War continued for many decades, and the countries tried to form a bloc that shared a similar ideology in different terms, like political, social, economic development. They all converged. So they were trying to come to common grounds of not only of development, but also of how they set the things. So civic participation also did not differ much across these countries, and its main characteristic was that it was organized by the state and controlled by the state. So those of you who remember this period of the Cold War know that everyone had to go and participate in whatever meeting or manifestation or whatever. But also controlled by the state. If you don't participate in these things that the state is actually organizing, then they come and make you to participate. So it was mandatory. And also any forms of and any initiatives that were organized by citizens themselves, or anyone trying to form its own community that pursues different civic goals or has a different agenda, was suppressed by the state. However, things changed with the fall of communism in 1989, and for some countries a bit later. So this common ideology, this common trend of development and settings that they were trying to put together for all countries already couldn't sustain. So countries started to diverge, and they started to diverge in all the aforementioned areas. Political development. So countries, by and large, into groups or separately, decided to take a different path of development since now on. I will talk a bit later when I return when I go to the discussion. So also economic development, there was already no planned economic, as it was called during the communist era. So each country had to take care on its own, and each country and the politicians in these countries had a different idea which path to take and how to do things. But also social policies. They were already not common social policies, and they were not borrowing things from each other, but they already had different social goals. So they already came with different things and with different ideas of development of the society. Previous studies found that civic participation in East Europe, in post-communist countries, is lower than the older democracies on the continent. And the reasons for these differences are various. All the bullet points that you see here are probably the most important and the most significant reasons, but also probably not the only ones. So during the communism, norms of civic participation, but also all social values, were imposed by the media and also by the regime. So the regime was defining what are the values, what are the forms of social participation, and all people had to follow strictly without diverging from them. And also mandatory forms of civic participation organized by the state. The state says go and participate, or the state says don't go and participate, and everyone had to be obedient and follow what the regime said. Also, suppression of any autonomous form of participation. This was even illegal. Try to form your own community, and in many cases you end up in prison. Also, after the fall of communism, there was a very big disappointment and disillusionment of these regimes. So in the beginning there was a mass euphoria. Oh, communism failed, we want democracy and we want change. We elect new politicians, but then the people that were the new politicians, not in all, but in many cases and in many countries, were not the people, and they didn't have the agenda that the people wanted and that the people expected. So people were largely disappointed, not in all countries, but in many, and also, well, their illusions about the future development were just broken. Also, the lack of trust of institutions, not only after the fall of communism in 1989, but also, also before that. All these reasons are maybe the very core of the reasons why people didn't want to participate after the fall of communism. So even now studies 20 or 15 years later after the fall of communism, they find differences in civic outcomes between East and the rest of Europe. So Torni Purta, for example, she found that student civic knowledge is lower in East Europe, which is not surprising because civic knowledge previously and all the patriotic education during the communism was very focused, and it had very narrow agenda that was leading to all the same thing. And after the fall of communism, well, people, especially young ones, they didn't even know what democracy would mean as a word, except for historical lessons about ancient Greece. So also lower trust in governmental institutions on the east side of Europe, the post-communist countries, which is directly related with the last two bullet points from the previous point. So the disappointment and disillusionment and lack of trust in institutions before and after. And also the forms of civic participation, they differed largely and still differ largely between the East and the rest of Europe. So in the older democracies, they are more formal, more organized, not controlled. But people there form unions or political parties freely, or any associations, and they pursue their goals. But this is more formal than just going on strike. Of course, it's not that it's not happening. or a public meeting that is not organized by any political or social player. On the other side, in post-communist countries, it is less formalized. So people really like doing flash mobs or discussing things on web forums or just between each other, but this is somehow encapsulated in an informally established community. And one of the things is also that in many cases, because of the lack of trust of institutions, people communicate, discuss, and participate mainly into their local community or within the family or extended family or clan. So they're really detached from the broader social processes and movements that are going into the society. In this presentation, in this study, the countries are divided by the age of their democracies, and I have mentioned the term young and old democracies, or new democracies and old democracies several times before. So all democracies are understood as countries that disestablished their monarchies around the World War II or shortly after that. So they embraced democracies after disestablishing the monarchy, and they have longer development of their democracies and also longer experience with it. And it also comes back to the civic education, because they have their students, when they were at school, they were taught in civic norms, but civic norms in terms of democracy, not monarchy and not communism or any other regime. And on the other side, young democracies who, after World War II, just took the path of development of communistic regimes. And democracy was embraced after the fall of communism of 1989. So democracies there are much younger, so to speak. And they also have a shorter experience with democracy, and this also affects the civic education. So what is civic participation? In this study, it is operationalized as activities in the local communities, politics, or general society within the local country context. So it includes formal and informal group or organizational membership, individual actions, voluntary activities, political activities aimed to bring improvement to the local, societal, and country-wide settings. So this is not the only definition of civic participation that you will meet in the literature. There may be tens or maybe even hundreds different. So different authors understand it in a different way. And many of them also understand it in the very same way and put it as a synonym of civic engagement, which is different because then it's civic engagement is embodiment of the civic values, but also shaping the overall attitudes, understanding, and willingness for action. But it doesn't mean action yet. This study has two main objectives, and the objectives are related with the data. I will come to the data a bit later and explain why exactly this kind of data and this kind of participants were chosen. So the first objective of the study is to explore the levels of the different dimensions, three only of them, different dimensions of expected future civic participation across European countries participating in ICCS 2009, but also to compare them depending on the age of democracy. And second, to evaluate the fit of a theoretical model of civic participation across these European countries that participate in ICCS 2009. So the research questions are three. What are the levels of expected civic participation? Note the word expected. across the analyzed countries, and also how and to what extent the expected future civic participation of students is related to their personal characteristics, attitudes, behavior, and perceptions. Also, do the levels of participation and their association with different student characteristics vary according the age of country's democracy. So all the results in this study and in this presentation are discussed and interpreted only with the age of democracy, not related with the quality of democracy. That's a different question. So some of the background, I will reiterate some of the things that I said in the introduction to justify and to explain the methodology that was used. So during the Cold War, these countries were encapsulated, and there was also even a Union for Economic and Social Help. I'm not sure if I translate it correctly in English. So all the exchange of services, of goods, and even of, to a large extent, of values and ideology was done only within the circle of this, with minor communication with the outside world. There were also attempts for leveling the social classes, making all people equal in their income, in their opportunities. And also, the civic participation was mandatory, imposed, organized, and controlled by the state. So, strongly related with communist ideology without many chances to diverge from it or not following it. Promoted by the media and the forced membership in different organizations. So some people had to be members of the Communist Party, and this was even in many cases related with the position that they take in the society or at their working places. If not, they had to participate in some other organization. And even the youngest people, they were involved in organizations like Pioneer organization or the Komsomol, which were political, highly political, and they were preparing people for membership later on in the Communist Party. So any initiatives other than organized by the party were just suppressed. With the fall of these regimes, the emergence of, from the common path of development in economic, social, and political terms, especially after year of 2000, so new regimes urged people to relearn the civic values and change the attitudes. The old values that the former regimes promoted were already not applicable to the new conditions. And this also reflected the education. In many countries there was a mass hiring and training of teachers in civic and citizenship education, because they need to be, someone needed to be the agent of promoting these values to the youngest people. So, although at the same time in many countries there is no formal curriculum on civic and citizenship education, in some of them it is part of all other topic areas, or in other countries is part of the historical and social sciences. There are differences in civic engagement and participation between the East and the rest of Europe. However, they're decreasing, which still doesn't mean that the gap is closed. There's still recent studies find such things. The contextual factors that the theory is postulating, being related with the civic outcomes, are divided into two broad groups: antecedents, so everything that was inherited in some way from the conditions within the society or within a country or within a culture. So it would be the educational system, historical and cultural heritage, family history, family characteristics, students' personal characteristics, and social group characteristics. The other group, broad group, is processes. These are the educational policies within the countries, instruction, governance, but also the specific curriculum and the syllabuses that take place. Also, student socialization and learning, the specific political events that occur in the country or in the broader society, communication and activities at home. So there is one very important difference between these two, and this is why they are split into two groups. The antecedents are not amenable characteristics, so they are very rigid to change, for example, to a large extent. So for example, history and culture, they're not amenable to changes. On the other side, the processes, they are. Educational policies, for example, or the socialization and learning, which depend on other contextual factors. They are amenable. Also, the political events, to some extent, they're even random. But these are things that can be changed and that the policies and the society has some control over. The other group of variables are those who affect youth civic participation. These are community and neighborhood. Family, this is another classification. And then student characteristics and school characteristics. These are at least the most important ones. So the data that was used for this study comes from the International Civic and Citizenship Study, or ICCS. It was conducted in 2009 with another cycle coming in 2016. So you have already heard about this association, my colleagues that gave the previous workshops and also talks like this. They also work in the same association. It's International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement. So this study is quite different than the other ones that you have heard about on specific subjects like Teams and Pearls, who focus on science, mathematics, and reading. This one has a different target population. It's 14-year-old students, which in most or all countries that participate is usually grade 8. Somebody may ask, aren't these students too young to be tested for such things or to be asked for such things? Well, previous studies show that actually, well, we all know that at least we are allowed to vote at the age of 18. What is the voting age in Poland? 18? Okay. But at the same time, these students do not get the civic values, and they do not start participating in some form of social participation when they get 18 suddenly. I mean, these things, all the values and attitudes, to a large extent are set much earlier. Well, each one of us, when being born, he starts learning from the very beginning, right? From age of 0. So they're exposed to media, they're exposed to family communication and discussions, they're exposed to talking with friends, classmates, teachers, watching television and reading news or listening to news. So other studies have found that already at the age of 14, if you do not participate in formal events or informal political and social activities like joining trade union or going to vote or stand as a candidate in politics, then you already at least have set all the attitudes and values, or at least most. Of course, it's important to note that at this age they are not that stable yet. However, there are studies that show that people that were tested at the age of 15, not tested, but surveyed at the age of 15, about their at least electoral participation in future, 80% really do, it's a longitudinal study, 80% really do what they have said before. So they really follow this pattern. So the number of participating countries is 38. So these are countries from all over the world, from Europe, Asia, from Australia, from Latin America, North America. So the samples representative, so you already know about Timms and Pearls. To a large extent, the sampling procedures and the sampling techniques follow that one, with the only exception for the teachers, which is a random sample of teachers across the school. So these samples are complex samples. They're drawn with unequal probabilities of selection, and back when the data is used in analysis, weights need to be used with adjusting for these unequal probabilities using jackknifing repeated replication, just on Timms and Pearls. We used in this study data from 22 European countries that participate in the study. So the important thing is that, well, the data shouldn't be generalized to all over Europe, simply because not all European countries participate that. So we can talk mainly about this with cautious inferences about the two types of democracy, the young and the older ones. So in this study we have 9 young and 13 older democracies. And however, we needed to exclude 2 of the countries. So the Netherlands, it had very low participation rates, and it didn't meet the sampling requirements. So the data, it is quite unclear whether it can be trusted or not. So we needed to remove that. Also, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and Malta, you know, these are very small countries. So as far as I remember, the sampling in these countries was census-based and not a complex sample. Still, there were very small numbers of sample schools, and this was an issue for the analysis. So we preferred just to keep them aside in this study. So we have, these are the measures that were used, the outcome measures that were used in this study. So these are complex scales that were constructed using IRT. So each one of the 3 is comprised of different statements. Future informal participation is about talking to others about views, political and social issues. And I think this is something that here on the east of Europe we really like. Also, writing to a newspaper about political and social issues. You know, contacting the media with your views or objections, even. Also, contribute to an online discussion forum about social and political issues. And nowadays, every newspaper has its own forum, or just possibility to post comments and people's reactions underneath. And join an organization for political or social cause. Like, for example, Greenpeace. Also, future electoral participation, and these are very specific activities. Actually, the last 2 scales, the future electoral and future political participation. These are about formal activities and formal participation in the society. So the future electoral participation is voting in national and voting in local elections, and getting information about candidates before voting in an election. So future political participation is not about voting and is not about exercising your civil rights, but it's directly involving oneself into political activities, like joining a political party, even standing as a candidate of a political party, join a trade union, and help a candidate involved in the candidate's campaign. As I said, these are complex scales. They were derived using item response theory with Rasch scores with weighted likelihood estimation. I think that Eugene talked about this, right? Yeah, okay, so you're familiar with this. So these are standardized measures which have mean of 50 and standard deviation of 10. The levels of participation. So we used all the statements that comprise each one of the scales, the informal, the electoral, and the political participation. So we computed the percentages for each response category, but it was not easily interpretable. So what we did was collapsing the category. The original ones were: one, I will probably participate. No, sorry, I will certainly participate. Two was, I will probably participate. I will probably not do this, and I will certainly do this. So with these four categories, computing percentages and comparing the values and making significance testing was hard to grasp for the reader. So we decided to dichotomize these variables, collapsing the categories 2 by 2. So after doing that, we computed the percentage of students who responded positively for each statement in each country. And we also performed significance testing for the differences between the young and the older democracies. This significance testing is so for each country, we compute the value, then we find the median for each group, and then testing each group's percentage against the median of the counterpart group. So each, let's say, East European country, former communist country, its percentage was compared and tested for statistical significance with the median of the old democracies. So afterwards, to address the second and the third question, we used regression models. We used each one of the 3 scales as an outcome variable in the regression analysis. And we included predictor variables. One thing that I have to mention here, initially we planned to use hierarchical linear modeling. Unfortunately, it was not possible because the interclass correlation was very low. It was between 0 and 0.6, meaning that actually the differences are not between the schools and not between the classes even. Differences are more on individual level. So this would not permit us to draw reliable inferences, and actually the results wouldn't really show any interpretable patterns. So the predictors of the future participation outcome variables for each scale, the same linear regression model was built. So student personal and family characteristics, these are the gender, national measure of socio-economic background, civic knowledge, expected years of further education, parental interest in political and social issues. The last one is reported by the student. So because these are students that are at 14-year-old and olds, and so they can report reliably about their parents. There was no parental questionnaire for ICCS. And also student civic attitudes and perceptions, like trust in institution, internal political efficacy of the students, citizenship, self-efficacy, and openness of the classroom discussion, like freedom of speech, which is very popular lately. These are results of the levels of participation. So what you see in this table is actually highly aggregated and summarized results from all the statements that were included there. So they are not about a separate statements that much, but these are the positive answers. Yes, I will certainly or probably do that. you see that in the younger democracies, the future informal participation rates, the student answers of yes, I will certainly or probably do that, found significantly higher than the counterpart group in most of them. And you see that actually in just few countries like Cyprus, Greece, and Italy, which are located on the south of Europe, only in these countries they tend to be higher than the younger democracies. Then for future electoral participation, we see that in almost all countries, students expect lower participation in future compared to the older democracies. And in the older democracies, there are not that many countries that are lower than the younger democracies. You see that actually the red triangles pointing up in the older democracies are much higher, much more. I'm sorry, I forgot to explain what exactly these mean. My mistake. So all the red triangles that you see pointing up indicate significant difference with the counterpart group. So, for example, for Bulgaria, this red triangle would mean that its percentage, the average percentage of all the statements, is significantly higher than the median for the older democracies. And the other way around, the black triangle pointing down for Czech Republic, for example, means that its percentage is much lower than the counterparty group. And the other way around when we discuss when we talk about the older democracies, it is the same thing. And then we see that there are countries that, like Bulgaria, Latvia, and Russian Federation, where the percentages of students saying, yes, I will stand as, let's say, one of the statements, I will stand as a candidate, or I will help a candidate in his political campaign, is much higher compared to the older democracies. But in older democracies, on the average, you see that in the majority of countries, students say that they will stand as political candidates. So, to summarize these results even more, in general, younger democracies tend to have lower levels of future participation compared to the older democracies, which is also found by previous studies that were not that old. So, for example, the authors that I cite here, they summarize many other studies before 2009 and 2009. There were also found differences in the different forms of participation. So, for future electoral participation, older democracies show higher levels, and the younger democracies, most countries at least, show lower intentions to participate in elections. Then for the future informal participation, it is just the opposite pattern of the future electoral participation. So people from the younger democracies, they anticipate high informal participation in society. And also for political participation, younger democracies show consistently lower participation expectations. But in the rest, that is the older democracies, there are mixed patterns that are dominantly higher percentages that are found, but these patterns are not that clear. There are differences among the younger democracies themselves. So the group only for younger democracies is discussed here. So in general, Central European countries exhibit lower expectations about their future electoral and participation compared to the other one. So these patterns are mixed, not completely clear and not easily interpretable. I will try to interpret all this in the discussion part. Here what you see on this slide are the results from the regression models that we run. So what you see in the cells, so each row is actually divided into two. In the first row, for each one of the for the covariates, you see only the number of countries where positive relationship was found. And also in the second line for each row, you will see the number of countries where negative was found. So this is, again, a summary of the results, because it's really hard to put all the tables with the precise numbers and flags for significance from the significance testing. Also, the columns are divided into the East and the rest, the younger and the older democracies, for each one of the scales. So INF part stands for informal participation, ELEC part stands for electoral participation, and poll part stands for political participation. So I will go quickly through the table, pointing on the important patterns that are found here. So we see that for gender, for example, we have in the older democracies 7 countries where gender is positively related with informal participation. What is meant here by positively? Well, girls and boys are coded as 0 and 1, and so positive means that boys tend to anticipate higher participation than the girls, and the difference is statistically significant. We see that for the electoral participation, there is difference only for 2 countries from the older democracies, but there's also a negative difference, meaning girls will tend to participate more in 2 countries. Now, looking at the political participation, so what you see here is that in 8 countries from the older democracies, in 8 young democracies, girls anticipate higher participation in political activities, direct political activities. And 6 out of 13 for the rest, for the older democracies. So, socio-economic background, although other studies report that there is a statistically significant difference, here we don't find such except for isolated countries in the older and younger democracies. So we see that in just one country for the younger democracies, and for the informal and electoral participation, 2 for political participation, and it's a similar thing with the older democracies. So there are countries that where this effect takes place, and there is a positive or negative relationship. But these are isolated cases. It's hard and not even possible to draw any inferences and to define and to find any pattern between the 2 groups. Civic knowledge, this is interesting. So you see that for informal participation, I have highlighted here the second line of this row. So civic knowledge, for informal participation, you see that it's negatively related in a bit more than half of the young democracies, and much larger part in the older democracies, and it's negatively related. Negatively related meaning here that students that are less knowledgeable in civic matters, in civic issues, they tend to anticipate higher informal participation. So you see something different for electoral participation. You see that students that have higher civic knowledge, in both cases, for younger democracies and older democracies, all countries that comprise these two different blocks, students that are more knowledgeable tend to expect higher participation. However, look at the last column here that I have highlighted the results. So in 9 countries, which is all countries from the younger democracies, and almost all of the older democracies, students who know less about civic matters, about civic issues, they anticipate more to participate in future, in political activities. Let's move on to further education. Further education, this is expected further education of the students. How far do you expect to go in your studies? So will it be just lower secondary, or you also expect to complete higher secondary, or you expect to go to university and study in university? So here we see that informal participation in both the younger and older democracies, we have just single countries where there is a relationship, significant relationship, and in both cases it is negative, meaning that the lower the expectations of students about their further education is, the higher is their expectation that they will participate in informal activities. The next column is interesting also. You see these are the results for the electoral participation and its relationship with the further education. So you see that only 2 countries in the young democracies have significant and positive relationship. But in the majority of countries from the older democracies, such relationship was found. And also for political participation, you see that these are just isolated countries, isolated cases in both groups where positive or negative relationship was found. Next one is about participation at school. You see here, so this one, participation in school is because they are not allowed to participate in formal activities in the society, but they have different activities, social activities that take place at school. Like for example, participate in preparation of the school's newspaper, or participate in various activities, social activities that were organized by the state, by the school. So you see here that there are only 2 countries where there is a positive and significant relationship in the older democracies, but in more than half of the younger democracies, such relationship is found. For electoral participation, it is the same for the younger democracies, but you see that it is much, much higher, the predicting power of this factor for the older democracies. Much more countries exhibit such thing. And it is about the other way around for political participation. That is found, significant relationship is found only for the older, mainly for the younger democracies. 6 out of 13, which is about half, more than a half, but only in about a quarter of the older democracies. So, political discussion. political discussion with peers, with friends, with classmates. So we see that in all countries for the informal participation, this factor is significantly related with the outcome, both for the younger and for the older democracies. So it is much more modest for the electoral participation and political participation for both groups of countries. And you see that in 7 countries, parental interest, how interested your parents are in political and social issues. So you see that in both cases, 7 countries exhibit such a positive and significant relationship, which is about half for the older democracies, but is a majority for the younger democracies. And you see that in the case of expected electoral participation, you see that this factor shows positive and significant relationship in all countries, no matter which group they belong to. For political participation, it is a bit different, a bit more than a half of the younger and almost all, nearly all of the older democracies. Trust in institution, a very important factor. So I have marked and highlighted this block together for the trust in institution, political and citizenship efficacy. Because as you see on the screen, in all countries, regardless of which group they belong to, you find positive and significant relationship. Meaning that these who trust more the institution, these who feel themselves as having higher political or citizenship efficacy are likely more or tend to respond, yes, I will do that. The only exception here is for the trust in institution for the older democracy for informal participation, but it's still almost all countries. Well, it's a good pattern. Imagine if the relationship was negative. That would cause some worries, raise some flags. And then openness in classroom discussion, you see that there are just few countries in both blocks for informal participation who exhibit positive and significant relationship, and about half of the countries in both groups for electoral participation. Just to add some more general results that stem from these models that were run. So predictors of future civic participation in Europe show different strength of association in the 2 groups. So you see that there were quite a bit of differences in the different groups concerning different things in some cases, but in very small number of cases there was hardly any countries. There were hardly any countries that show small things or equal things. But in a majority of cases you see that there are quite a different number of countries that show significant relationship, and in some cases the direction was also different. Student and personal and family characteristics. So you see for the student sex that it is not related with informal participation in new democracies, but it's a positive and significant difference in more than half of the old ones, of the old democracies. And there was also significant negative relationship with political participation in almost all young and half of the old democracies. So these are really different number of countries in each block. So there was no gender gap between boys and girls for the electoral participation. So, which is a good news because they will be equally represented with their votes. So civic knowledge, regardless of the age of democracy, less knowledgeable students tend to anticipate high informal and political participation, More knowledgeable students tend to anticipate higher electoral participation. ICCS. All the previous research finds it is strongly associated with civic participation. With this study, with this data, with these participants, we were not able to find that. And this is also regardless of the age of democracy. So, I mean, it is not that we didn't find single countries where it matters. But in general, on the average, across the two blocks, the number of these countries is very small to draw any patterns and to make any conclusions about the two blocks. So expected further education, it's significant and positive relationship that was found only for the electoral participation, with clear pattern only for the older democracies. With the younger democracies, things were quite mixed. Also, parental interest. There's a stronger association with informal participation in younger democracies, stronger association with political participation in older democracies, but not differentiation patterns for the electoral participation. Association, as you found, as you saw, was found in all participating countries. So, student civic behavior. So, the current participation at school, stronger association with the young, within the young, but not with the old democracies. And something that is important to note about the model fit of these models with all these predictors is higher amount of explained variance was found in the older democracies for informal and electoral participation. Slightly higher amount of explained variance in younger democracies for the political participation. So, but in general, these were more of isolated cases, separate countries. Not in all, within the younger democracies group. So the model fits better, but on the other hand, the rest of Europe, the older democracies, they just have a longer tradition and with democracy, and they were actually the countries that develop many of these concepts and also the theories that stand behind the civic participation. So I would expect this to happen. Let me just discuss these findings because I just presented them briefly, but let me add some discussion and try to explain what actually stands behind these results and what could explain these differences. First, I will go back to two things that I said in the beginning concerning the informal participation in younger democracies. So, remember that the existence of, there was only formal and strictly organized, controlled by the state, mandatory civic participation activities. So, people during early 90s, they were in mass euphoria to go and strike and on the squares. So it was a big hype because they had the freedom to do that. And it seems that this tradition still goes on and still people maybe have this internal opposition against formalizing things that they have civil rights about. And now people have sort of unlimited freedom to do that. And they really enjoy exercising these rights. So the above have led to less formalized and community-based forms of engagement. So the levels of participation do not seem to be related just to the age of democracy or only to the age of democracy, or not even so much. So to a large extent, countries tend to cluster on their cultural similarities and even geographical proximities, if you want, and common history that they share from the past. So patterns of socio-economic gradients across the new democracies that are similar to these were found in other studies. For example, Daniel Caro, who is also co-authoring this paper, and I had a paper that is quite aside from civic participation. And we found actually quite similar grouping of countries like in this paper. For example, Central European countries, they exhibit quite similar traits, quite similar patterns also in this paper to each other. So, but they share a common history for hundreds of years, to a large extent, more or less common culture. And also educational systems. So, for example, first, Central European New Democracy belonged to the Roman Catholic Church. Well, not all people, but still the dominant is this one. Which is different than the East European countries that are mainly dominantly Orthodox, Christian Orthodox, with mixture of Protestants. So also southeast part of Europe is different, and they're mainly Orthodox with Roman Catholic, mixed with Roman Catholic, and also even some Islamic population. So also Central European new democracies were part for the Austrian-Hungarian Empire for quite long time, and the influence of the educational traditions will come mainly from Austria, but not exclusively, also from German educational traditions. And some authors say that these traditions, despite the last distance in time, they still persist. On the other hand, the educational systems of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that were under Soviet tutelage for, I don't know, 70, 75 years. After 1989, they restored their traditional connections from the past with the Central European countries and also with the Scandinavian countries. And these relationships also include, to a large extent, the educational policies. Also, divergence in the socio-economic development after the fall of communistic regimes. Central European countries, what they did is to build strong democracies with equal rights, but also equal obligations of the citizens. Very rigid tax system. They grant the property rights, and it's not posing the rule of law. But on the other hand, the Balkan countries and the former Soviet republics, they built liberal democracies with limited freedom and fairness of the election processes, limited rule of law, and also ineffective, to a large extent, ineffective administration that could not serve the citizens or the state itself. And also, on the other hand, Central Asian countries and Belarus, these are not included here. This is just to stress on the different developments in politics and social matters. These remained authoritarian with no rule of law. So actually, as you see, and as I said previously, these countries shared a lot of common things between each other in political and social development, and there was a very big exchange. But they diverged largely after 1989. Second thing, the introduction of communism different between the Central and Eastern Europe. So, for example, the penetration of the regime in Central European countries met greater resistance, opposition. But it was not the case when moving more on the east, because any resistance was just smashed there. So this also may have resulted in a different development of communism for these several decades. So third thing is the transition back, or transition from the opposite process. From the totalitarian to democratic regimes was characterized with different speed, different pace, different quality of the democratic institutions, but also the economic institutions. So in more central and in some Eastern European countries, communistic regimes were abolished abruptly. In some countries like Romania, there was even a revolution, literally. But in other countries, for example, on the Balkans and also in the former Soviet Union, this transition was done softly, but it also took much longer. However, the aforementioned may have impact on something, all these that I just listed, on something that is much, much more important and having a much greater impact on the development and the civic issues. And this is the quality of democracy. So all of the above differentiation paths, historical, political, and so on, they may have led to a different quality of democracy that was developed in these countries. However, the focus of, this is just as a side comment, the focus of this paper and on this study is not the same. So the quality of democracy, although being a very important concept, is not the purpose of this paper, and it's beyond that. Thank you very much for your attention.